All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for sticking around for the best and final panel here. As introduced, I'm Hallie Kuhn, Vice President of our Science and Technology, which is our investment arm of Alexandria Real Estate Equities, Alexandria Venture Investments, and I'm really honored and delighted to introduce the panel here today. So I'm just going to go down the line to introduce, and then we'll jump right in. JJ is CEO of Appia Bio. Appia was spun out of a number of institutions, both as technology and founders, including USC, Caltech, and UCLA. And if folks had a chance to check out the immunology talks that were standing room only this afternoon, Lily Yang gave a presentation, which is one of the scientific founders of the company. Sumant, I'm going to miss your last name here, Ramachandra. All right. Sumant joined ImmPACT Bio in November 2021 as CEO, and he previously served as Chief Science Technology and Medical Officer at Baxter. And ImmPACT closed their $111 million Series B this January, and last year also merged with the UCLA spinout Calthera from Yvonne Chen and Tony Rebus to expand their CAR-T pipeline. To the left, Brent Pfeiffenberger, COO of Neogene Therapeutics. Formerly, Brent was SVP of Oncology at Bristol Myers. And seeing a bit of a trend here, Neogene is also focused on the cell therapy space, developing TCR-based cell therapies. And the company is dually located both in the Netherlands and locally here in Santa Monica. And then last, Scott Foraker, President and CEO of A2 Bio. Prior to A2, Scott was an executive at Amgen, including the founder and general manager of the biosimilars business. A2 has raised over $200 million to date and is also developing cell therapies for solid tumor indications. So I wanted to kick it off today just to kind of really connect with the local ecosystem and this mix of academic industry partners here. And so, JJ, I wanted to start with you. As I mentioned in the intro, you have founders and technology from 3 different local institutions. Can you speak to the ongoing relationship you have with the founders and institutions as you've built and grown the company?
Yeah, I think it's been a really good experience building it here in LA with them. So Lily Yang from UCLA, Pin Wong from USC, and David Baltimore from Caltech. And I think those are 3 of the 6 co-founders of the company. And really, I think founders have 2 important jobs in building the early days of a company, and that's the people you bring in and the culture you build. And so for us, we have our research meetings sometimes with them, but certainly review meetings with them. And to the extent that we can, glean the culture of scientific excellence from our founders and really instill that from the beginning in our company, that really builds to our strength. And then, both them and the rest of our founding group comes with a great network of people to draw from to build the company. And, in the industry that we're in, it's all, knowledge and it's the data you produce. It's incredibly important the people you bring in. And so, especially being local institutions, it becomes actually quite advantageous to be able to tap into, emerging star postdocs and scientists that we can bring in from their networks, as well as, of course, our networks in the greater LA area.
Great, and maybe to kind of hop around our geographies in LA here. So started with West LA, and then I'm going to jump to the Thousand Oaks area, which of course has a long legacy with Amgen there. So Scott, can you maybe talk a little bit about, you came from Amgen, you established the company there, but how that connection and, legacy with the strength of Amgen has been part of how you thought about growing a company locally in greater LA?
Yeah, the growth in the area has been extraordinary in the last 5+ years. Lots of new companies being funded, and it's remarkable to see. It's quite rewarding. And we've been able to take advantage of it at A2 in a number of respects. The first is recruitment, right? So that's pretty obvious, right? But it's not just employees. I actually recruited an independent board member, who is local as well, who spends a lot of time at our offices and actually rolls up his sleeves in helping us tremendously. So the local talent is extraordinary. We've also been blessed to have some employees, Kite employees as well. And then also the local universities as well, right? Caltech, UCLA, they've been extraordinary places for talent for us as well. And then also, right, our experience in neighboring cities, right, Thousand Oaks, neighboring city to where we are in Agoura Hills, the local government officials, needed education, but they were open-minded on the basis of the Amgen success and them wanting to build and see, successful biotech companies, in the neighboring cities and communities. So that open-mindedness to at least understanding the complexities of the biotech business, whether that be government officials when you're working together on permits or landlords and potential landlords. So, it's been really, really encouraging to see. I think long overdue, but it's happening now, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was, thinking back to some of the panels today, and, the last one with Ari talking about, the kites and Ataras, and now kind of we're seeing the second generation of companies. And that kind of brings me back to West LA, to you, Brent, to talk about Neogene. And can you guys are based in the Netherlands. I'm sure you had, the opportunity to base kind of your US footprint, anywhere. Why LA, and why did it make sense for you as a company?
Yeah, I think the big driving reason is we just, our initial core U.S. leadership team and our core founding team had a really long-standing history and tradition in the LA area. And when we looked at that, we felt it was an easy way for us to capitalize and build on what was out there. And you think about Southern California in general, and LA and some of the surrounding areas more particularly, it has become a leading hub for cell therapy for probably the past decade or so. And I think one of the true driving forces behind that has been the founding and the ultimate success of Kite Pharma. And I think for us, having that initial connection and that deep history here was something that we wanted to capitalize on to make sure we could really accelerate our position in the market. And I think the second big piece for us was we wanted to make sure, as we looked at a place, that we had access to world-class facilities. And we were lucky enough to secure the two original Kite sites. So there's a lot of history between Kite and Neogene as we look back.
You have some big shoes to fill.
We do. So, and maybe a quick story on that. Success attracts success, but we had our grand opening late last year for our U.S. headquarters, both based in Santa Monica. And we had some board members and scientific advisors and some investors and our employees there. It was really good energy. Open up the site, and we had the privilege of hearing Dr. Ari Beldergren talk, and we heard Ari talk, and we heard David Chang talk. And when you're there in those moments and you hear the history that comes from that building and the adventure they went on and the innovation that went through, their journey, and then you see the ultimate success of patients benefiting from that, it's a bit of magic, right, that you can't replicate. Knowing that there's not just history, but there's people here who are still so engaged in the community and wanting to invest more to create the next set of cell therapy companies that can make a big difference.
Great. And then, it sounds like clearly we have 4 amazing cell therapy companies here. LA is growing, but there's definitely challenges. There's challenges in all regions, and there's definitely challenges in new regions. So maybe, Sumant, to kind of ask you, as you recently, transitioned to LA from the East Coast, what were some of the challenges, you experienced, when joining a new company as CEO and coming to a new ecosystem?
Well, first of all, this is a great area. I cannot say anything better than that.
The weather's much better.
Yeah, but listen, I think I'm a transplant to the area. I think, Brent, you had mentioned that you're a transplant. There is the perception in the East Coast and the Midwest. I've lived in both places, and I finally made my way west as an old man, not as a young man. And I would say that you come to California, you get great science, but you pay heavy taxes. And my response was, listen, you go for great science and you can't take the money with you anyway at the end of life. So, and that should be the attitude. You should actually go to a place where you're going to love working, you're going to have a great life with your family, and you're going to help patients along the way. And you're going to have fun with it. And I want to use that word fun not lightly, because you have to take serious work and make it really fun for people. And that's a motto in our company that we try to really engender. We're small, we're 30 people. We have a group in Israel, and we have a group here in Camarillo and West Hills. And I will say that probably the hardest transition as a transplant was, it wasn't plug and play for my family and I. We had to kind of discover the ropes. We did have a very good friend at Amgen who was just about to retire in the executive team, and who gave us the name of his realtor, introduced us to the area, and it's an old friend from many, many years ago. And so that helped a lot. But someone mentioned on our prep call, imagine all the people who don't have those resources. And the majority of the people who have to transplant to this area, to work in this area, do need the help to make sure that they can settle in to the right schools if they have children like I do in grade school and middle school, and get the support system in place. You come and plug and play. You don't have friends necessarily. You come for work, but you got to build a community around yourself. And those are really important for people wanting to stay in the area. So it's a great job, it's great collaborations, but you got to have a life outside of work. And that means people will settle here, venture capital will seed in this area, and then you build an ecosystem. I was there in Boston at Mass General as a physician scientist when it started getting seeded in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And that's what we need here. We need that type of seeding, and we need people to be willing to come here to build a community around LA.
Great. And maybe just a call to Bioscience LA, who's sitting in the crowd. I think when it comes to kind of resources and helping people transplant, you'd be a great organization to take that on. So I'm officially putting you on the spot. So, maybe opening it up to the panel, and again, as a contrast to the previous panel, with Kite, Allogene, Atara, we had 4 public companies, very large public companies, that were speaking. We have 4 private companies here. How was the fundraising process for you? And, kind of some of the challenges may be associated or not associated with being in LA. I'll just open it up, and you guys can kind of jump in and comment on the process.
Who wants to take that one?
I just say one thing. We just closed our Series B in January, and I joined before the close, and it's a process, okay? And so, but I will say there was no limitation because of LA, 0. I think VCs, at least my experience, has been bet on 2 primary things: the quality of the assets and the quality of the people. And if those are a match, they're willing to bet, okay? And it would be a third aspect, though not necessarily needed, if the VCs see a management team, and especially see a CEO they can get along with, that'll work with them, I think they will make that bet further. So that was my experience. I'm new. I'm a public company, big company guy. This is my first foray. I have my marks from it, but I've learned a lot, and I know that you can choose a good syndicate.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I think I'm sure everyone's aware of the markets. It's been pretty brutal out there, both for biotech and now more recently for tech companies. And so I would say how it's been just in the market, I would say it's been actually quite different than the last several years. There's a lot of slack in the market. And I think what people would consider a deal zone has been certainly compressed a lot from the public markets dropping as much as they have. But to Sumant's point, I think being in LA has not really affected that at all. I think if you're an entrepreneur thinking about starting up a company, then I think the geography matters, not because people can't wire cash from anywhere in the world. And in our syndicate, we have West Coast, East Coast, international investors. But I think it's around having confidence in building the infrastructure that is necessary for building a successful company. And they have to have the confidence at a startup stage that you can nucleate that and build forward on that. But then I think once you're up and going and you're able to fill those roles of expertise and experience, then, I think you're essentially, assessed on the assets and you fundraise on that. And I think in that sense, it's been, same as any other geography.
Yeah, and maybe Scott, to put you on the spot, because JJ mentioned infrastructure. You guys, built out a lot of your own infrastructure, including manufacturing facilities, which has definitely been a trend as well today, I think, across the talks. Can you talk a little bit about, that experience, and as a small company, making sure that you had the right infrastructure in place to, carry out your programs and manufacture as you need to?
Yeah, so first I'll say at A2 we've raised over $200 million and location was not an issue. As JJ said, I think if the investors have confidence, right, that you can build a successful company with the talent base, et cetera, then, the money will flow, right, if you have good science. And so location, not an issue at all. Building a manufacturing facility, it's tough. It's tough, but at A2 we believe it's important to have control over the process. The process is the product, and we successfully built research labs and then a manufacturing facility, and we're able to do so really cost efficiently as well. And we learned plenty along the way. But we had support from the community, the landlord, so it was a great experience, actually, with plenty of learning along the way that we're now applying that learning to the next one that we're building. And but it's been a good experience overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned talent, right? Kind of that talent is perhaps the most critical piece, right? When a VC is looking to invest in a company, for most the executive, but then also building out the team. I guess maybe to transition to you, Brent, you mentioned, kind of leveraging kind of Kite and the expertise that's been built here in this community. How has the talent piece been in terms of hiring, whether it's, the scientists, on the ground to the more executive and leadership team?
Yeah, I mean, we grew significantly back in 2021 as we established our U.S. footprint here. And, when I think about that rapid time of growth with employees, and we're still growing today as we transition to a clinical stage company, I think what really helped us goes back to that core set of initial leaders who had such history and experience here in the LA area and the ecosystem around us. I think the Kite experience that they brought forward was a talent attractor. And honestly, I give all the credit to our early leaders, some of who I see, sitting here, where we had candidates actively seeking jobs with us because they wanted to either, one, work with those leaders, and or they knew we were building something very cool. And I think that helps tremendously when you have that ecosystem around you. Eventually, though, as you continue to grow and you've got great companies that you're competing with for some of the same talent, more generally, you start to tap that network out. And I think one of the things we've got to do a better job at going forward is, the pandemic has entrenched the remote, hybrid work style. And yeah, there's some negatives to that and there's some downside to it. But in general, what I've seen is, in reality, there's some candidates who are never going to want to make the commute to LA, or they never want to relocate to LA, at least for us. But what I have also noticed is if you can get them on board through a modified work style, when they're actually here, one, they see the stuff that Sumant was talking earlier, like they see the sun and the ocean and the weather and, the mountains and the nightlife and the diversity in the city. And they see that connected to this super concentrated ecosystem that we've been talking about all day today, that I don't think they quite appreciate it before they got here. And I think, in their mind, then it clicks and says, this is a place that I can live and I can have a really long-term growth in my career in LA or the surrounding areas. And I think that's a really powerful tool that we've got in our pocket to use today.
Yeah, one stat I recently heard from Boston colleagues was that on an annual basis, there's about 25% churn in Boston across biotech companies, which is incredibly sizable and really challenging as a small company. So I think the thesis that really getting people here and, once you do get someone, having them, stay long-term is a huge benefit for the company.
I think I want to add, so in the large company environment that I used to work in, used to build a leadership team one person at a time. In a biotech company, you build the entire company one person at a time. Literally. I interview every single person, doesn't matter what level. And someone said, well, how long are you going to do that? I said, well, as long as I can. Okay, you're never too busy for selecting people because they select you. Okay, it's a two-way street. And if you want someone, you got to show them the attention and you got to show them that the culture is a fit.
And maybe transitioning, and we didn't chat about this in our prep call, but it was really top of mind of some of the talks today, is actually on the clinical side, right, and access to clinical trials. And I think, Sumant, with ImmPACT, one thing that was really interesting about kind of how the company evolved was you guys merged with Calthera, right, which had a clinical asset. Can you just talk a little bit about, perhaps kind of the synergy there, right, with the technology that Yvonne and Tony Rebus had built, but then also potentially, and I open up to any of you guys thinking about clinical trial expertise locally in the area.
Yeah, so it's key, especially in today's financing environment, to have assets that have clinical promise, right? I think it's changed in the last few years where there were a lot of big bets in preclinical assets. And the cycle will happen again. It'll go back out, and the money from the sidelines will move back in. So our collaboration with UCLA, and I came after the merger happened, so no credit to me, but it was basically, the concept was two companies that had logic-gated cars, that had premier founders on both sides, Giddy Gross on the ImmPACT Bio side, who published the first paper with cars in '89, and then you had Yvonne Chen, Tony Rebus, Chris Puig-Sauce at UCLA, and then you have Calthera, right? And you merge it based on the fact that there's synergy between the two from a research perspective. But the biggest benefit for us was that UCLA, with Yvonne Chen and Dr. Sarah Larson, were already conducting a study in NHL. And that gave validity to this dual car, this tandem 1920 concept that has shown incredible data. So this gives us at least what I would call oxygen to help the rest of the programs also be nurtured and be taken forward in this logic-gated approach. And this is just Boolean logic. It's a simple concept of just simple algorithms of and, not, or, if, then, else statements for biology. And so that helped a lot in terms of fundraising for us also.
So, I guess kind of transitioning to thinking about the entrepreneurs in the crowd and starting new companies, I wanted just to kind of go down the line here. And in terms of, for folks that are thinking about spinning out a company in Greater LA, any kind of points of consideration. We'll go over 5 minutes, if you guys don't mind. So I promise we'll end soon. So if you can just kind of think about, what advice you would give, right, in terms of, and even kind of, support, right, in terms of motivating companies to spin out, kind of what are some pointers that you would think of? Well, JJ, we'll start with you.
I come from a venture background, so this should be top of mind. But, I think it's really around people, as we kind of spoke about already. I think, obviously you need that business plan, and you need to think about how you're going to get the proof of concept and all the runway stuff. That's just the mechanics of it. But I think it's all around people and culture, and there was a mention of remote working, but there's a lot of value created in the liminal spaces of the interaction. Even in masked up, if you're working together with folks, you can kind of read the eyes, and as you're looking at data together, there's value to be found in being able to have those conversations and exchange insights and being able to find the right people. I think the saying is the right people on the right spots on the bus. I think that's incredibly important, and so I would just not ignore that aspect as a really critical factor to success.
I've seen great teams take mediocre assets and make them great. And I've seen mediocre teams take great assets and kill them. And I think it really comes down to having an aligned vision, a leadership team and employees that are aligned to that vision, but willing to debate respectfully and getting things forward and to a better place. And I think that is fundamentally how we're going to take this forward.
Yeah, quickly. Look, I think just being here is a pretty damn good start, right? You look around this room and this event and, you know, the amount of expertise and experience and skill sets you can tap into. And I think importantly, the willingness of people in this ecosystem to help and engage is incredible. So tap into it. And the second point I make, relatively simple, is be passionate about what you're trying to accomplish. To me, passion is contagious. And, you know, there's no doubt in my mind I wouldn't be sitting here today if I didn't truly believe in what we're trying to accomplish at Neogene and have the passion for trying to change, you know, the treatment paradigm for solid tumors. So be passionate.
I agree with everything that the panelists have said. I guess all I would add is that got to bring together complementary skill sets. One thing that I've learned in this business is you need a lot of different skill sets to make a successful business. It takes more than just great scientists. It takes more than great commercial people. Right? It's a really broad array of skills and talent that are required, and getting those right skills and talents and coalescing, bringing them together, you know, rowing in the same direction in a way that's passionate, I think is really what's necessary. But don't overlook the need to, you know, it's more than having just a great scientist or two. It really takes a village. It really does.
Great. So perfect ending. I know we're in between you and happy hour, so I want to thank you guys so much for the time. Everyone can make their way up for drinks, and we can debate allogeneic versus autologous all night. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Ed.